So I'm going to throw over now to Queensland to hear from Jodie and James. Thank you for joining us today, Jodie and James. Now, you're both healthcare workers, is that right? Up on the Sunshine Coast.
Yep, that's correct.
Yes.
Right. And Jodie, understandably, the workplace has changed dramatically then for you. Can you tell us a little bit about how this actually created a space to talk to your colleagues more?
So I work at the Sunshine Coast University Hospital as a nurse. So a very large facility. Generally, we're used to being very, very busy. During the COVID period, we kind of fluctuated a bit between almost being, frantic and we don't know what's coming and we've got to prepare, to suddenly our activities slowed down due to all the precautions we had to put in place. So during such, I guess, an unstable and unknown time, understandably, there's been a lot of anxiety and uncertainty felt by my colleagues, and the people that I interacted with on a day-to-day. So I remember very early when COVID first actually came onto the scene, I was reading Psalm 46 and it talked about, God being our impenetrable shield and how we don't need to fear even though the world changes. So that gave me a peace, which I was able to then take into the workplace and maintain that, even though I could just feel as worried as they were. So I understood, I guess, where they were coming from, but in the same way, I just tried to maintain that calm presence and remind them of the practical things that we could do in order to help decrease the spread.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, Jodie. Thank you. So, we actually featured a particular story in our recent newsletter. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. So in February, we had someone join our team. His name is Hadrian. So he was a colleague of mine only a number of weeks until COVID started. As in my regular daily practice, when I have the opportunity to, I like to drop what I call little breadcrumbs about my belief.
Yep.
With the people who I interact with. So, for example, if we're talking about what did I do on the weekend, I'll be like, well, I went to church. Or in that case, it was I joined my church family online. And just give examples and try and, I suppose, lead the conversation towards what I do believe. And I've been doing that with Hadrian. And one day in particular, he asked me the question of, well, can I ask you about your beliefs? And, trying to calm my excitement. And I was just like, most definitely, ask away. And it was just this amazing opportunity for me to share the gospel. And what is absolutely phenomenal was about how God set this up. So I had only just joined the EPT that James and I go to. And we were just finishing off the weeks of how do you share the gospel? And one of the weeks was how do you share that Bible verse that means something to you and how it's impacted your life? And the other one was how do you share the gospel, succinctly in a simplified way that you can in a workplace.
Yeah.
So that was literally the evening before Hadrian asked me the question. And James had also recommended to watch the 2 Ways to Live video, and I'd watched that the evening before. So when Hadrian asked me, it was like I was completely prepared for the question. And yeah, God just lined it all up, and I was able to share it. And I could see that he was like, yeah, that really makes sense. And I could tell he was like, I'm keen to know more. So throughout the conversation, I led him towards, at the point of saying, would you like me to even say the sinner's prayer with you and what that meant?
Yep.
But he did say to me at that point, no, I would like a little bit more time to think about it. And so, I left him with an example and I prayed that, God would get him across the finish line as such. And what was really cool is the next evening, he actually sent me a message saying that he he had decided that he did want to give his life to Christ. And what was even more special was that he opened up to his family about it, and they were able to pray together.
Wow. Yeah. And since then, you've told me he's been dialing in now to church on Sundays. Is that right?
Yeah. So I tried to get him involved in a church quite early. That
Hmm.
was another thing that we picked up from our EPT studies.
Yep. Yep.
But I could see he was a little bit nervous about it. So I said,
Mm.
well, join mine.
Yep.
You can watch it online.
It's just a link now. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, he was dialing in, joining us online. And what is really quite awesome that my church does is we have these little study booklets,
Hmm.
which we then take to our growth groups or home groups or whatever you want to call them.
Mm.
So what I was actually able to do is get a copy of this for Hadrian, and we were able to go through them together on our lunch break.
Yeah, so that's great. So he was dialing into the online services on Sunday, but then on during your lunch breaks, going through some of the small groups material in that work setting as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
That's great.
And
So yeah, really good examples of how it sounds like there was that idea of patience and love dropping those breadcrumbs along the way, and then sort of in God moving through that, but also the creativity side of things around how He interacts. It's a great story, Jodie. Thank you for sharing.
no worries. Thank you.
Now, sitting next to you, though, we have James. Now, if I understand correctly, you've only met Jodie, what, 3 times in person now? Like, is that right?
Yeah, yes, David. I had only met her once actually while this is all going on. So now it's about the third or fourth time. So.
Yep. So why are we interviewing you then, James? Like, where are you fit into this story?
That's a really good question. I'm sort of carried along by the whole thing, to be frank. I originally started out in my own workplace doing some one-to-one, and I mentioned it excitedly because I was loving it to my pastor. And about a week later, he said, come to this meeting on a Monday morning. And it was David Pitt from City Bible Forum, whom at that stage I'd never heard of them. And then he told me about this incredible organization and what it does. And I was thinking, wow, this is organized, connecting people. It's streamlined and all these resources. My mind was just... So I was super excited, and then modified my work to be at the biggest workplace I could find, which is the biggest workplace on the Sunshine Coast, the University Hospital there, and set up an EPT. And we'd only been in a month, maybe 2, doing it in person at a cafe, and then COVID hit. So I had to scramble around to try and think, how can we make this work? And tried a few things, ended up with Zoom. And Jodie joined. Jodie was sort of there, but was she sort of came in at a time when it was kind of messy. But I met her once, not through the EPT, but a separate event, and then online. And she went through the coffee dinner gospel.
Yep.
But only the last half. But every week, she seemed to be obediently doing it with enthusiasm and was getting these incredible results. And I was like, wow. So that's really, I'm just sort of, I'm a spectator, really.
That's great. So one final question, maybe to the both of you then. How has doing this in a group really helped to hear about that story that you shared, Jodie, before? How does doing that in group had really helped you guys? And how's it, because it sounds like you've been able to do it in a post-COVID digital form. You're moving back now into a hybrid form. But what has it meant to do that in a group together? Just a short answer, maybe from either of you.
I think for me, being able to stay connected with each other was incredibly helpful. And it's not just the skills that we gain from being part of it, but it's also hearing the stories that we're sharing about evangelizing and how that spurs one another on. But most importantly, we still get to share the gospel with each other. We still get to pray together. And that's just absolutely vital when we can't meet together physically.
Yeah, even in virtual form, it sounds like. Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, thank you for sharing that amazing story with us, Jodie and James. Thank you that you've been able to continue to meet together, even if it isn't an online format, to continue to pray together, to continue to train through things like coffee, dinner, gospel, but ultimately to be able to be faithful in sharing the gospel with those around you and seeing God continuing to work even through this situation. Thanks for joining us today, Jodie and James.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.